Every life is a story, every moment a chapter. Here on Slow English Stories, we pause to listen.
The music was a whirlpool, pulled her into its spinning heart. Around her the ballroom blurred. It became a river of light and silk. The air was thick with the scent of waxed floors and blooming flowers. She was dancing, truly dancing, for the first time in her life.
A viscount held her. She did not know his name. His hand was firm on her back, guiding her through the waltz. This was it. This was the life she had only read about in books. Bliss, passion, ecstasy. These distant words were now real. They thrummed through her veins with the music.
She felt she was reaching a place she had only dreamed of. It was an exquisite, pale existence. A place that vulgar souls could never attain. Her husband, Charles, was somewhere on the edge of the room. He was a dull shadow she refused to see. Here, in the Viscount's arms, she was someone else. She was the heroine.
With each turn, she saw herself in the tall mirrors. She was a woman transformed. Her gown of pale saffron was a whisper of elegance. A rose trembled in her hair. It had tiny, artificial dewdrops that caught the candlelight. She felt born for this world of quiet luxury.
The air grew heavy. A servant shattered a window pane with a sharp rap. A rush of cool night air swept into the room. With it came the sounds of the world outside.
Emma glanced toward the broken window, and she saw them. The faces of peasants. Their rough, sun-beaten features were pressed against the glass. They were gawking at the spectacle within.
In their eyes, she saw a reflection. It was a reflection of the farm of her own past. A life that now felt a world away. A sudden, sharp bitterness pierced her joy. She had been cheated. This beautiful, shimmering life should have been hers all along.
The music swelled. The Viscount spun her faster. She closed her eyes. She let the dizzying motion erase the faces at the window. Erase everything but the glorious, fleeting present.
The journey home was a descent into cold, dark silence. The magic of the ball evaporated. It disappeared with every clatter of the carriage wheels on the rough road. Charles, slumped beside her, was already asleep. His soft snores filled the cramped space.
Emma stared out at the dark, flat fields. The memory of the waltz was a painful ache in her chest. Her heart, she felt, had been touched by the rich, and it had left a smear of something that would never fade.
Back in Toasts, the world seemed smaller, grayer. The boredom she had felt before was now an active, suffocating presence. It was in the creak of the door, in the damp that oozed from the walls, in the grit on the floor tiles.
All the bitterness of life seemed to be served on her plate. It rose with the steam from the boiled beef. The beef that Charles ate with such noisy contentment. His simple goodness, his placid love, became unbearable.
His conversation was as flat as a street pavement. His mind was devoid of the dreams that consumed her. He was a good man, an honest man, but there was no elegance about him. He was the cage she had willingly walked into.
Her days became a torment of restless fantasy. She devoured ladies' magazines. She pictured a life in Paris, a world of ambassadors and duchesses, a world more vast and vague than the ocean. She measured time by its distance from the night of the ball.
The growing discontent festered inside her. It turned into a physical illness. It left her pale and listless. Charles, in his clumsy, earnest way, saw only that she was ill. He feared it was the air of toasts that was poisoning her. He decided they must move.
While packing their things for the new town, Emma opened a drawer. She pricked her finger on something sharp. It was the wire of her wedding bouquet. The orange blossoms were yellow with dust. The satin ribbons were frayed at the edges.
She stared at it for a long moment. This brittle relic of a promise that had turned to ash in her heart. Without a second thought, she threw it into the fireplace.
It burst into flame. It burned faster than dry straw. A brief, bright flare. Then it crumbled into cinders. She watched it burn, feeling nothing. Only the cold resolve of a woman leaving her own life behind.
Yonville was not the escape she had hoped for. It was a sleepy, languid town. A backwater defined by a sense of depression. The landscape was characterless. The pace of life was unhurried. It was toasts all over again, only with different faces.
There was Monsieur James, the town pharmacist. A man of pompous speeches who loved his own voice. And there was Monsieur Leroux, the merchant. A man with a sly smile and a soft voice. He seemed to sense the hunger for luxury inside her.
But there was also Lyon. He was a young law clerk. In their first conversation, Emma felt a spark of recognition. Like her, he was bored with provincial life. He spoke of books, of music, of a beautiful life somewhere else.
When he spoke, it was as if he were giving voice to her own thoughts. They did not fall in love with each other. They fell in love with the reflection of their own romantic ideals. They saw these ideals in the other's eyes.
Their conversations were not about themselves. They were about characters in novels and emotions in poems. They were performing a romance they had both read about. They were co-authoring a story to escape the one they were living.
The hope he represented made his absence more painful. Lyon grew tired of waiting for a love that seemed impossible. He left for Paris to continue his studies. Emma felt as though the only light in her life had been extinguished. Rage and despair settled over her.
Then came the agricultural show. The town was alive with a festive energy. But for Emma, it was just another performance of mediocrity. She found herself on the arm of Rodolphe Boulanger. He was a wealthy local landowner. He had a confident air and a reputation as a womanizer.
He had seen the boredom in her eyes. He sensed she was an easy conquest. He led her away from the crowds. They went up the stairs of the empty town hall. to a window overlooking the ceremony in the square below.
The pacing of the world slowed. They stood alone. The stuffy air filled with the scent of his cologne. The scent transported her back to the ballroom, to the Viscount. Rodolphe began to speak. His voice was a low, practiced murmur.
He spoke of lonely souls, of fate, of an irresistible attraction that drew two people together. Does not this conspiracy of the world revolt you? He whispered. His words were a perfect echo of speeches from her novels. If two poor souls do meet, they cannot blend together. Yet they will make the attempt, for fate has decreed it.
From the square below, another voice drifted up. It was the amplified, pompous voice of a politician. He was delivering a long, droning speech. As Rodolphe leaned closer, his breath warm on her neck, the voice from the platform boomed about modern agriculture.
100 times I've tried to leave you, Rodolphe murmured. And yet I've followed you. I've stayed with you. From the square, for manures. As I would stay with you tonight, tomorrow, every day, Rodolphe declared. From the square, to Monsieur Caron, a gold medal.
Emma heard none of the irony. She was deaf to the absurdity. She was blind to the calculation in his eyes. She was being seduced not by the man, but by the language. By the perfect performance of the romantic hero she had been waiting for.
She surrendered to the words, to the feeling of his hand closing over hers. As the crowd below erupted in applause for a prize-winning pig, their fingers intertwined.
Charles, in his blissful ignorance, became the architect of his own betrayal. He believed horse riding would be good for Emma's health. He encouraged her to accept Rodolphe's offer of a horse. He even wrote to the man himself to arrange it.
They rode into a forest glade. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and leaves. Dappled sunlight fell through the trees. He spoke again of his love. His words wove a spell she no longer wished to resist. And there, in the quiet of the woods, she gave in.
Returning home that evening, a wild joy sang in her blood. She felt a sense of triumph. Had she not suffered enough? At last, her life had become romantic. She had a lover. She repeated the words to herself in the mirror. I have a lover. I have a lover.
But the charm of novelty slipped away. It revealed the eternal monotony of passion. The grand love affair became a series of hurried meetings. It became practiced words. Rodolphe, a man of experience, quickly grew bored.
To him, Emma was like all his other mistresses. Her declarations of love were just the same tired language. What she thought was a unique passion was, for him, just another conquest. She had escaped the platitudes of marriage, only to find them waiting in adultery.
Her behavior grew reckless. She paraded through Yonville with Rodolphe, a cigarette held defiantly between her lips, as if to vex the world that had denied her. She began to dream of escape, of running away with him and starting a new life.
She made plans. She bought a traveling cloak and bags. She presented her fantasy to Rodolphe as a settled fact. But he had never intended to go anywhere. For him, the affair was a pleasant diversion, not a life-altering commitment.
On the eve of their planned departure, a servant delivered a basket. It was a basket of apricots. At the very bottom, beneath the fruit, was a letter. It was from Rodolphe. With cruel, carefully chosen words, he ended their relationship.
The shock was a physical blow. The world tilted. The words on the page swam before her eyes. A violent sickness seized her. She fell into a brain fever that nearly claimed her life.
For weeks, she lay in a delirium. She was suspended between life and death. When she finally began to recover, she was a hollowed-out version of herself. She turned desperately to religion.
She knelt at her prayer stool. She tried to call upon God with the same sweet words she had once used for her lover. But no faith, no comfort came from on high. It was just another performance. And the audience was empty.
In a last effort to revive her, Charles took her to the opera in Rouen. The music, the lights, the sense of a grander world reawakened the passions lying dormant within her. And then she saw him. It was Léon back from Paris. No longer a shy boy, but a sophisticated man of the city.
Felt like a sign, a second chance. Charles, ever trusting, left her in Rouen for an extra day. They agreed to meet the next morning at the cathedral. Emma spent the night composing a letter of refusal. It was a final, flimsy shield for her wavering virtue.
She arrived at the great church. Seeing Léon waiting, she feigned a sudden piety. She asked a beadle for a tour of the tombs. She clung to the cold marble, to the images of the saints, to anything that might save her from herself.
But Léon was impatient. He had waited 3 years for this moment. He pulled her away, out into the square, and hailed a cab. "Ah, Léon, really, I don't know if I ought," she whispered. "It is very improper." "How so?" he replied. "It is done in Paris."
The words were an irresistible argument. She let him push her inside. "Where you like," Léon told the driver. And he pulled the blinds down. The carriage set off. A small, sealed box, a tomb on wheels, tossed about like a ship at sea.
It rattled through the streets and over the bridges. It galloped into the station and out again, careening without purpose. From inside, a voice would cry out, "Go on!" And then, "No, straight on." The driver, bewildered and exhausted, could not understand. He drove aimlessly for hours, his horses sweating.
The carriage was a mobile prison, a space of absolute freedom, cut off from the world, a symbol of a desire that had no destination. Then, in the middle of the day, a bare hand emerged. It emerged from beneath the yellow canvas blinds.
It threw out scraps of torn paper. The scraps scattered in the wind. They lighted like white butterflies on a field of red clover. It was her letter, her final resolution torn to pieces and given to the wind.
The journey continued until evening. At about 6 o'clock, the carriage stopped in a quiet back street. A woman got out. Her veil was pulled low over her face. She walked away quickly, without turning her head.
The affair with Lyon settled into a dreary routine. The ecstasy she had chased proved to be mundane. She grew bored and demanding. He grew weary of her moods. All the while her debts were mounting. Monsieur Leroux, the patient spider, had spun his web perfectly.
Panic set in. The threat of public ruin was a terror she could not face. Thus began a frantic, humiliating pilgrimage for money. She begged Lyon, who had none. She pleaded with businessmen, who turned her away. Finally, she went to Rodolphe.
She found him in his grand house, sitting by the fire. She threw herself at his feet. She reminded him of their love, of his promises. She brought back all her tenderness, all her passion. "I loved you so," she wept.
He was moved for a moment by the performance. He drew her onto his knee, caressed her hair. She believed she had won him back. "I am ruined, Rodolphe," she finally confessed. "You must lend me 3,000 francs.
The warmth vanished from his eyes. He stood up, his face suddenly grave. He did not have it, he said. It was impossible. "You have not got them," she repeated. "I ought to have spared myself this last shame. You never loved me. You are no better than the others."
She looked around the room. At the expensive furniture, the silver-gilt whistles for his whips. "But for you," she cried, her voice breaking. "I might have lived happily. You made me believe you. And now, you repulse me because it would cost you 3,000 francs.
She left his house in a daze. The world was drained of all color. There was nowhere left to turn. She walked, numb and cold, to the pharmacy. James was not there. Only his young apprentice, Justin, who adored her from afar.
With a few soft words, a desperate, calculated charm, she convinced him to give her the key to the storeroom with the dangerous chemicals. She found what she was looking for. A blue jar labeled with a skull. Arsenic.
She reached in. She took out a handful of the white powder, and she pushed it into her mouth. She walked home. As she went, she felt a strange, inky taste. The taste of metal on her tongue.
She had imagined a swift, peaceful end. A romantic fading away like the heroines in her books. The reality was a betrayal. It was not a quiet death, but a 3-day-long torture.
A fire spread through her body, followed by icy cold. She was racked with convulsions. Her body twisted in agony. The romantic illusions were purged from her. They came in waves of black vomit.
In her final moments of consciousness, as the priest administered the last rites, a sound drifted up from the street below. It was the hoarse, lewd song of the blind beggar. A grotesque and final intrusion of the vulgar world. The world she had spent her life trying to escape. Then there was nothing.
Charles was destroyed by grief. He clung to the memory of the wife he thought he knew. He preserved her room like a shrine. He refused to believe the rumors, the debts, the whispers.
Then one day in the attic, he found a small rosewood box. Inside were the letters. All of them. From Rodolphe, from Lyon. The truth, in all its cruel detail, was laid bare before him.
He did not rage. He did not curse her. He simply sat with the evidence of her betrayal. He sat until his own heart gave out. He was found the next day in the garden, dead in his chair.
Their daughter, Berthe, was passed from one relative to another. She finally ended up with a poor aunt. The aunt sent her to work in a cotton mill to earn her keep.
In Yonville, life went on. The townspeople gossiped for a time, then forgot. And Monsieur James, the pharmacist, the man of science and progress, the man who had always served himself, flourished.
He had an enormous practice. The authorities treated him with consideration. Public opinion protected him. He had just received the Legion of Honor.